But I'll tell you what, Pimp, when I just watch this Vitality team play, my brain just screams at me the whole time. This is just the best I've ever seen, mate. Like, the things they do, no one can do. Not even Astralis, you know.
There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, we're back with counterpoints. Obviously, if anyone's read social media recently, we're going to have an interesting opening segment because you know what, Pimp? One thing I've tried to do in my career is, I wouldn't say get ahead of trends. I just think that, like, oftentimes you have to almost give people permission to think an idea before they actually consider, is it true, or even think about it. And so one thing I've tried to do in my career is actually, especially for things like eras and people being the best team ever, I just try to like let people know, like, really clearly with my messaging, like, as soon as I think there's a chance, it's why I've got some epic pieces of content over the years, bro. I've got a piece of content for real from 2016, both a tweet and an article where I say, like, Simple could be the greatest player. Not in just in say yes, I said in all of esports, bro. That's pretty gangster. We can get that far ahead. But my point is, I didn't say he was at the time. I just pointed out, like, you know, let's start having this conversation. Let's watch this person's career just like you would with Donk now. Let's track how they do, and then that way, when it arrives, we're not just caught surprised, like, oh, actually, wait, what all these made? I guess he is the goal. No, we're like ready for it. So what's funny is, I think most people, Pimp, what they're waiting for to give them permission to say Vitality is the greatest team of all time is they want them to win this other major. They want to do the 3 in a row like Astralis did with the Magus lineup. And then once that happens, then they'll say, oh, by the way, then they'll go, they've got more Grand Slams and more trophies, and more top 5. Then everyone will say it's obvious and everyone will agree. And at that point in time, by the way, unless you're a really old school fan who has like a lot of admiration for Astralis, probably all the modern fans, is what all they saw was Vitality. They'll probably just, everyone will say they're the GOATs. But I actually do think, mate, I don't think you've jumped the gun. I think we can do it already. Like, realistically, what does really winning that major in Cologne make or break them being the best? I don't know that it does. Like, if you really think they're the best ever, you could have actually argued that during some of their peak last year too. Like, if you put that team against anyone, don't they win? You know what I mean? I actually think it's quite interesting, fully enough, that people like Dupree, who played in both teams, are sort of coming around to this angle now. I feel like, even though traditionally, if you think how sports stars are, usually you'd always sort of say your team from the past is the best one, because if anything, they don't ever have to play them, they never have to prove it. We can always just live in a dream. Like, the joke is, if you ask Thorin who the best football team ever is, he'd say it's like, I don't know, Milan from 1992 or something absurd, because I was the boy, Pimp, they were the GOATs, they were winning everything. In a way, how could any team now ever be like that? I'm not a boy anymore, I don't have that childlike wonder. So you know what, here's what's funny, Pimp. I think, first of all, spoiler, here's the beginning of the episode. Vitality is the greatest team to ever play Counter-Strike. But before we go into the details, here's where we need to start, Pimp. You and I have an obvious reason not to actually think that. We should be biased as fuck in favour of Astralis. One, you are Danish, and you made it quite clear for a long time that was the team you dreamed of playing in with most of your former teammates. And in my case, I was one of the people who, when Astralis didn't even win, people used to go, you just suck their dick all the time. So of course I was loving it, like Anders was when they became number one. It felt like validation, you know. But I have to say, Pimp, let's start here. I did think until literally about halfway into last year, you know what, I'll probably never let any team be the GOATs over Astralis. Come on, does no one remember how good Astralis was, all the things they did? They were unbeatable, you know, every team was confused. At the end, no one had a plan to beat them. The joke is they beat themselves. They stopped playing the fucking game. Time went on, you know, the maps changed. They never really did get beaten, you know. It wasn't that Liquid stopped them and that ended there. They didn't. They came back and even beat Liquid and won the fucking major. But I'll tell you what, Pimp, when I just watch this Vitality team play, my brain just screams at me the whole time. This is just the best I've ever seen, mate. Like, the things they do, no one can do. Not even Astralis, you know.
No, I agree. I think it's... did we have an episode like 3 months ago where we discussed, you know, whether or not maybe they were the greatest of all time already? And yes. I remember back then, I think you came up with like 2 or 3 arguments as to why you could still have Astralis in contention. And I came up with a few different reasons why you could still have the debate whether it was Astralis or Vitality. As of today, if you ask me, and yeah, I've made it quite clear on my social media, it's like I'm having a tough time coming up with any argument whatsoever as to why I should consider Astralis a better team than the current Vitality. And I think that's why I stand right now, because I very much agree, you know, for the longest time I thought that no one is ever going to be considered as great as Astralis. And maybe we're going to have a team who's going to win a lot of trophies, you know, but they're never going to be as consistent as Astralis. They're never going to win the 3 majors. They're never going to win, you know, another Grand Slam or, you know, let alone 2 Grand Slams in a row like Vitality have just done. I felt like it's, at some point you get around to a team where you feel like that's never going to be beaten. And that's how I feel by Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Despite
absolutely.
The Mbappe and the Neymars and whoever else is coming up, Lamal Jamal or whatever they're called nowadays. Like, I'm having a very tough time imagining that we ever gonna see anyone at that level again. And obviously, at some point, it's probably gonna happen. If you were to odds, is someone gonna match Ronaldo's scoring record? Within the next 50 years, then odds are that someone will coming out of nowhere. But you can never predict that. You can never imagine that because it's so extreme. And that's how I felt about Astralis for the longest time as well. But I'll be honest with you, mate. Like, I can come up with one reason. I think I can come up with one argument as to why you can debate whether Astralis is still, the greatest team of all time and whatnot. But apart from that one thing that people keep bringing up, which is, yes, Astralis kind of set a new era of how you play Counter-Strike. They have, like, let's call it cultural impact, in terms of how you approach anti-stratting, your grenade usage with Sonic, the paying attention to detail, etc., etc. They kind of did. The kind of word team that everyone was trying to copy was, I'm not even sure people are trying to copy Vitality right now to some degree. They're just, admitting to the fact that they play Counter-Strike so much better than everyone else. So it's not like Vitality have done something groundbreaking to the game, or they found a new gimmick, or they created their team, in a way where, this is how everyone is going to create their team for the future. They just took all the basics, and then they found all the right pieces and all the right players to do the basics at a higher level than anybody else. So the one argument I have, and I don't know if you agree, but that's like the cultural impact. Did they redefine how you play Counter-Strike? No, they didn't. But then again, they kind of did. They actually showed us that by playing what's quote unquote, correct Counter-Strike, what is Counter-Strike based on synergy, Counter-Strike based on communication, Counter-Strike based on just doing the things correct, and paying attention to detail, maybe even taking the Astralis way of doing it back in the days and just putting it on steroids. That's maybe the right way of playing Counter-Strike right now. And they made it so powerful that nobody seems to be able to not even being close to closing the gap. It's not like we're talking about any teams right now, who are getting closer and closer and closer. Like, it just seems like every time we watch a tournament right now, Vitality is just running further away, where it's not even a competition anymore. So I've made it quite vocal, and I stand by that, and I'm always open to good arguments, but I can't see a reason as to why I wouldn't say that Vitality is the greatest Counter-Strike team I have ever come across. And as you said, I would love to say that's still Astralis. I'd love to say that's still, the Danish powerhouse of back then, but I can't. For me, it's not even a debate anymore. There's certain things you can discuss in, around, and the topic, but in terms of what the conclusion ends up being, I've played the devil's advocate in my own mind a couple of times. I can't anymore. It's Vitality for me, and it's not even close at this point. Whether you win the major in Cologne or not. And that's another, just to close on that one as well. There's another problem I have with people saying that they need the third major, they need to win the Cologne major because that's going to be the greatest major of all time. It's not like we use the significance of whatever majors Astralis won, to build their case. Because let's be honest, the Starlight Berlin major, not really a great major to win by all means, So winning a Cologne major, if you're Vitality, in my mind, would almost, count as two majors compared to the Stalin one. So yes. I don't think that's a fair argument to use either. At least it's not something that moves the needle for me. So yeah, I'm Vitality.
All right, I'll take a similar approach. Before we go specifically, we'll do like the Vitality Glaze session. I'll do the same approach, Pimp. If I was asked to basically be like the defense lawyer for the position that Astralis is still the greatest team of all time, and I have to like battle against it, there actually are almost no reasons left. Because here's the problem. First of all, as you're saying, the craziest thing about Vitality that I really never thought I would see. Look, I actually think eye test wise they're the best team I've seen. That already is one thing. I told you that's one thing quite early that got me really excited. I remember seeing them like last year thinking, fuck, this is too good. Like, no one can, like, I've never seen anyone like elevate like this, a whole team as well, not just Zimu either. And then also, so there's the element of the eye test, etc. But actually, the other thing that was supposed to be unbeatable about Astralis was all the records, bro. No one was ever going to win 3 majors in a row. Now, look, they still haven't, but they absolutely might. They'd be the big favourites right now. Similarly, the idea that like anyone would ever have done stuff like, I mean, some of the fucking, like, they just beat the top 4s at big events. They just did 20 of those. Astralis did 19. Like, that's another record. Remember, I used to say that about Astralis. I used to say the insane thing about Astralis isn't even the ceiling. It's that the floor was making the semis. A bad event is you make the semi-finals. Bro, as you know, unless you're in literally, like, top 5 greatest teams of all time, sometimes a good event results a semi. That's just where, everything didn't go your way. Maybe you play some fuck like Donk and he plays awesome in the match. Sometimes you can go away from a semi and go, you know what? It's not the end of the world. world that we played well. They're going away from a semi like, fuck, what's wrong with the team? Shit, we really need to get back in the practice. We were all saying they were fucking fell off last year because they just made all the semis and just only made like 4 finals and won a major in a normal tournament. Again, these guys live in a different fucking reality than the rest of us. So I'll give you the angle for Astralis, but here's what's crazy. As I make the points, they immediately make me think of a counterpoint myself. So I'll give you one. One of the best arguments, if you wanted to say Astralis is the best team of all time, is, yeah, but they didn't have Zemu. Right, that sounds like a really good argument because what it means is they accomplished all this, bro, without Zemu. Now, listen, I do think, sadly, because I made this strong narrative over history that people like Simple and Zemu were different than Device. I do think, sadly, it makes people downplay Device and think he was like an average player or something. And it's like, no, listen, I hope people understand. If Zemu and Simple didn't exist, Device would have been the GOAT. Like, he was fucking unbelievable. He was really good. But he couldn't do the things Zemu does. Like, I'm even thinking of this tournament we just saw, where there was the game they played against Na'Vi, and on Mirage, in something like 17 rounds, Zemu just went 30-7. Not in any way, by the way, if you watch the game, he's not like forcing it, he's not being like a dick, he's not having everyone say, he just does a normal game, and the joke there is, it would have been a 40 bomb, the game ended too soon. Like, Device wasn't doing that, mate. He was playing within the system, he was playing normally. A good game for him would be 25 kills. That's, again, I feel like, actually, I'll use the analogy, people like Messi and Ronaldo have also just ruined everyone's brain for how hard goals are. Like, if you're Mbappe, if you had 20 goals in a season, people say you're a bomb. It's like, you're one of the best players in the world. Like, by the way, in the Premier League, there'll be like 2 players in the entire season get 20 goals. Really fucking hard to score. It's just how our brains go. You're supposed to score 50 goals because of what they used to do. It's unfair. So anyway, here's what's mad though, Pimp. As much as I make that point there of like, well, in some ways, weren't they a better team? Yeah, but my problem is when I watch Vitality play, it's not like we can rely on Zemu though. They're an awesome team and they have Zemu. So actually, if anything, that can then go the other way. Like, wait a minute, that means I think they can match Astralis as a team. And then also they have a player who might be the GOAT. Like that also, you can argue that's a point in favour of Vitality. Then I'll give you 2 other ones. Obviously, I know what you mean. Everyone's angle for Astralis is they invented modern Counter-Strike, right? Here's an angle that counters that. So when Astralis invented that style, I can tell you every single other top team took elements of it. The joke was Liquid took elements of it. They'll even admit that's why they even played the same maps, because there was things they could just copy and paste, and maybe we do it at like 90% as good as them, but 90% will get you the round win. We'll beat FaZe and SK and Na'Vi if we do that. You go down the line, right? Everyone did that. Here's an angle that goes counter to that. If you're saying that they didn't invent anything new in CS, right, then all you'd need is better players and you'd beat them. But I think this teams even have better players, by the way, and still can't beat them. And no one can beat them. If anything, isn't that kind of OP as well? If I was to say who's the best team ever, and my reply was the team that no one can copy what they're doing, that sounds pretty fire, bro. That's a pretty good argument. And then the last one is this. I actually think the real thing psychologically that makes Astralis feel unbeatable is that they were the gods of Nuke. It's specifically Nuke, bro, because back then no one was a god of Nuke. You only ever won Nuke by winning 10 T rounds, 13 CT rounds, sorry. They used to win the T half most famously when it was still a CT-sided map. That feels impossible, right? The Vitality has their own version. Bro, they are like 100% win rate over on Dust 2. You can't do that. No team. Bring any team in history. You know, it's one of my rules of analysis, Pimp. The rule back in the day was it's a bomber if your best map is Dust 2 because everyone plays it and it's the most like upset heavy map ever. So when you pick it in the series, you have to worry that the other team has an awesome game on it and they beat you and win 16-14 in the old system, you know. Obviously, it's a star map, isn't it? If you have Simple on the other team, he's going to go off. If you have Nico back in the day, Sharks or so, Cold Zero, all these people are going to dominate that map. They have a stat, if people don't know, that they've played 44 times on LAN with this lineup and they've won 40 of them on Dust 2. That is it. You have invented something about CS there. Whether anyone can copy it, I have no idea. I don't even know how they're doing it myself, Pip. But I think those and then lastly, yes, they didn't invent a whole utility system like Astralis did. Bro, I want people to give Apex some props. He might be the best utility player I have ever seen, though, bro. If you ever watch this guy, if you're trying to go up the banana on Inferno, you just get like half your health taken for no reason because he just drops a nade on your head. Everyone who's played matchmaking knows when you just spam the nades. You know, it's never hit anything. Like the amount of times there's a smoke in the old nerd and it doesn't do any damage. Like this guy is like he's doing that flusher thing of like he just knows where these fuckers are. He just has amazing feel for it. So I actually think you can do counter arguments to every argument for Astralis. And by the way, that's where the arguments end. Every other thing goes in Vitality's favour as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I agree. I very much agree. It's absolutely crazy, and you just made me think of that. In terms of like, okay, so how do we define, how do we win over people who still argue that Astralis invented new Counter Strike, or that's the stronghold. A lot of Danish fans are doing it. When I did a post on social media, you can clearly see that the Danes are on defense. They don't want to say just yet. We need to see a little more from Vitality.
Yes.
But I think you hit nail on the coffin right there by saying the map pool. Like, did you ever see Astralis flirt with having a 7 map pool?
No way.
And a functional 7 map pool? No, that was never the case. We just seen Astralis in the freaking semi-final. I don't know if you saw that, but that video they put up against
FURIA.
FURIA, there you go. Where they allowed Ancient in the map pool. Like, it made no sense whatsoever. They gambled and did it back in Chengdu, where you're like, okay, what the hell is going on? And then they've done a couple of gamble videos in group stage games or games that didn't mean as much. Here we're talking a semi-final with the ESL Grand Slam on the line.
And they're in their home crowd as well. That's their home stadium.
The home crowd. It's like, win that game, win the final, win $1.25 million. You're not gambling at this point. That's Vitality believing that if FURIA were to pick Ancient against them, that would be an advantage for them. That's a 7 map pool. And what was the most baller thing about that? I can't remember if it was Apex or Flame. I think it was Flamesy after the game where FURIA interviewed him and she kind of dived into it and said, okay, give us a little more. Why did you allow Ancient into the game? And he basically said that during the player break they were looking at the map pool and they're like, okay, so one of the potential weaknesses could be that Train is removed, Anubis is coming back in, and we know teams like FURIA. And he even said Aurora are good Anubis teams, so we need to play Ancient against those two. That's like the most baller thing I've ever heard in the terms of you're so much better than everyone else that you can allow yourself to introduce a new map into your map pool that you're only willing, by the sound of it, to play against 2 teams in the world. That's FURIA and that's Aurora, to counter the fact that they're good at Anubis. Astralis never had a map pool with that kind of depth, as in never. Obviously, they were great at Nuke, as you said. They had a great map pool overall, and back then when you played 5 good maps, and maybe even 6 to some degree for Astralis, you would win your best of 3, hands down. But for Vitality, as you said, like they have technically a 7 map pool right now where it's actually functional. There's been teams who claim that we can play all 7 maps, but it doesn't really matter if you're average on 4 of the maps. I don't give a fuck whether you play 7 maps or practice 7 maps. If you're not good on 5 of them or 6 of them, it doesn't matter. Whereas it does feel like Vitality, still curious to see them play a bit more Ancient against better teams, but I'm sure we'll see that at the major if that's going to be a thing. And then you kind of illustrated the point perfectly with Dust 2. Astralis had periods, where then they had the nuke streak. I can't remember how many games in a row it was.
I think it was 23 like or something.
23 or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Like, you're looking at a Vitality right now who on Overpass, the last 20 times they played it, they have won 19 of those games. You said it yourself with Dust 2 so far this season, unbeatable. The last, what was it? The last year they played it, it's 40 games and they won 38 on Dust 2. So technically, you not only have 1 nuke in your arsenal, you have 2 maps where you're unbeatable. Again, Astralis, never even close to having 2 maps at the same time when no one could beat them. They had a depth map pool, they would win the best of 3, they would win the best of 5, they'd find a way to do that, but they never had 2 maps where it's like, okay, no matter what we do, chances of us winning is 1 out of 20. Vitality have that right now in 2 maps, and you can even put Inferno into the mix, who's at 88% the last 3 months. Like, it's unheard of how good they play and how, I guess, deep the map pool is within Vitality. So to me, that's another argument, that it just blows it out of the water because, no one ever had a win streak of 23 like Astralis did back in the days. Now you're seeing a team who have 2 maps where I agree. I think Vitality, I think if you really dived into it, no team in history of Counter-Strike have ever had the strength that Vitality have on Dust 2 right now. Like, for more than 14 months, 15 months to play it 46 times, as you said, and win 42 or whatever it was, like, that is insane. And then adding it to the mix that is, as you said, Dust 2, a map where it's a little bit random, everyone plays it to a high level. It's not one of those, Nuke, Train, Anubis being reintroduced. It's a little bit of an outlier map. It's basically the map that everyone plays and everyone grows up with playing deathmatch and grinding out and face it, etc., etc. So it just makes an even stronger point for me, as you said, as to why I think Vitality is the greatest.
Yeah, by the way, I'll even say as well, if you ever watch Dust 2, put it this way, I've got some forthcoming content where you'll find this out. Like, that map is also just, it must be a dream for Apex to call the T-side, bro, because I actually think the way Rops plays Lurk on the T-side of that map is like every fucking CT's nightmare, bro. You can never, you can basically only rotate through your CT spawn. Imagine being the T's knowing that when you attack the A site, they can only come through spawn. They can't ever come from low B tunnels, they can't ever go through the door. Because if they do, Rops has like 1,700 100 off angles that he plays, and he's in a different one every time. And every time you have to, if you're the rotator, normally on Dust 2 you do a fast rotation because you have to get behind them. You have to start the mission of like, fuck, where's this guy first of all? Is he here? Is he there? Right, my teammate died. Which angle was that? Like that alone, that's before you even get to Ziwu, Flames attacking on T side. Also, on the point you're making about the map pool, I'll tell you another part that's mad underrated. People forget that in the time they've been the best, the map pool did change. Remember, Anubis went out and Train came back in. They also couldn't be beaten on Train. They even used to be the one they left for the decider, bro, and then no one could figure them out. That I can tell you right now, there's no way they were putting mad hours in on Train. That was right at the bottom of the map pool. They just were that good. They could also win that one. Then, as you say, they can now. They've played the Ancient 3 times. Apex barely ever played it in his career. He only lost one of them, which was that first one of Fury in the grand final of that fucking Chengdu, where he gambled it, and even then it was close. The time that they played it against Aurora, they won that one in OT. And Aurora, I'm pretty sure, by the way, here's a mad ball apart about that too. Can you imagine how destroyed Aurora must have been after they pick it like that, your perma, and then you beat them on it? And then this one recently, again, it's just absurd, isn't it? Like right in front of a home crowd, and all the like. Yeah, this is some shit where it's like the high stakes gambling is dope, but you nailed it, Pimp. The real problem here with that is that's not something they thought up the day before. That's something, like you say, it's like they're doing what I also say used to make Astralis the GOATs. Astralis didn't do what every other great team in history does, which is you're good at doing this. Once someone stops me doing that, I'll change and try and adapt, and then they'll beat me for one tournament, then I'll come back the next. Astralis used to somehow get ahead of you and figure out what you might do next and have an answer already. They're doing that with the map pool, like you say. At the beginning of the year, they're thinking in advance. Think how dope this is. Not, cool, can we win the next tournament? They're going, if we were to face someone like that, though, in this match, wouldn't it be cool if we could... Let's start practicing that now. Like, that's like, fuck it. Because one thing I'd like to throw to you on this, Pimp, is, you know, one of my eternal battles against fans is they do this thing where I always say fans think of being good at something, like, you know, in a video game where you get like a certain level, you're at level 22, and if you go to the next one, it's level 23. Well, the point is, in the game, you never go down in level D, you just go higher and higher and higher, and once you accomplish something, it's set. That's like 10 out of 10 for the sword. It can't go higher, 7 out of 10. Right? They act like once you get on top, that stays, and you can just work on other stuff. And I always tell people, no, think about the Dust 2 discussion we're having here. To be that good, you have to keep practicing it. You can't stop, otherwise you'll fall off, and it'll become just a good map. So that means when you put in extra hours to train when it was in the pool, Anubis now, if you ever dare to practice the Ancient for the 7th map pick, that actually means you have to trade off map practice somewhere else. Maybe that's the Mirage practice. Maybe that's another, you know what I mean? Maybe that's probably the most underrated part from a fan. It's like, there's only so many hours in the day, guys. You can't really practice all 7 maps. Like, you got to be on some next level shit to even think of doing that, mate.
Yeah, that's true. It's crazy. It's not like they're practicing, you know, as you said, like add another map pool and all of a sudden they practice 2 hours more every day. That's not how it works, as you said. But that's also the luxury of Vitality. You know, they're so far ahead that they realize that, okay, let's say that you have a practice week where you maybe play, I don't know, Dust 2 8 times on a normal practice week. We can get away with playing it 4 times during a practice week and still be as good as we were, or still be good enough to still beat all the opponents. And then sure, you know, at some point there's probably going to be a bit of a trade-off, and maybe that's what we see with Mirage, which is the only map that is a little bit unstable, so to speak, for Vitality. But if that is the trade-off of having a 7 map pool, you know, where Mirage is your weakest map, then that's fine, that's okay, and that's kind of how they constantly manage it and look at it. So it's a good point to bring out, but it's also one of those things where as long as it's working out as it is, you know, then it's not an issue. Obviously, had they been putting in hours into Ancient and had FURIA pulled off a win against Vitality on Ancient, then we could start having a discussion. Oh, was that a bit too gambly? Was that really necessary? I remember me and Yanko, we did the desk for the game as well, and I think we both agree that it wasn't necessary. Like, they could have gone a different route and they would have won that game regardless. So whatever they flashed right here, whatever they showed right here, it wasn't necessary. And yes, I'll also be honest, despite them beating FURIA on Ancient, I feel like you could see that that's not a map they play at a high level. You know, that's not a map they've had a lot of practice on. It's a map that, historically speaking as well, as Janko said, you know, Apex has never really played it before. You know, it's not a map that he's, you know, 4 years ago in a different team played a lot, and then they come into this new team and he still have some experience and some know-how. Like, that's basically a new map that he's never, ever approached before. And they still do it to a level that's good enough to beat FURIA, but there's no real, you know, Ancient specialists out there, you know, and that's why I think they can afford it as well, because it's like, as we discussed about, like, if you were to give me 3 teams right now that you consider Ancient specialists, I'd have a tough time doing that. I don't think there's any team who really excels at playing Ancient right now, so they're also finding a let's say, a hole in the market, where here we have a map that we haven't really integrated. None of the other top teams are extraordinarily good on it. So if we just played, according to our own standards at a decent level, that should be enough to beat a team like FURIA. And we're talking FURIA, the team that is supposed to be the second best team in the world, the team that's supposed to be contending for trophies, the team that beat them in late 2025 and denied them a couple of trophies. The fact that they can do that against them, it's just crazy how far ahead they are. It's just crazy how big the gap is. And then, as you described as well, and that's just something I want to bring up here as well with Robs and the way he plays the T side on Dust 2. I want someone to dive into this as a topic, or maybe even do a video on it, because Robs is fucking crazy on those T side. Like the amount of impact he's having. You mentioned it right here, Dust 2 T side. The fear that he's installing in the opponents, regardless of him getting kills or not, like it's almost sometimes irrelevant, what the scoreline is for Robs, because he's already per default installed a way of approaching him and approaching Vitality where you have to consider him being in certain positions. You have to be afraid that he's walking around a corner at any timing all the time, because that's like the fear factor that he installs. Furthermore, you use Dust 2 as an example. I looked it up on Nuke as well the last 3 months where Vitality played Nuke at a very high level. Robs' T-side rating on Nuke is 1.60.
That's
on
impossible,
average.
isn't it? I know.
That is absolutely outrageous. I don't think there's any player right now in the world, not even Saivu, not even Dog,
I don't think so.
Player have a specific side rating that is that high, that consistently at the top level. 1.60 on T-side Nuke. Like the way he lurks, the way he controls door area, the way he controls lobby, basically, whatever they're going.
He basically plays it on his own. He can just play it on his own, can't he?
Exactly. And it's fucking insane. Like you can never catch him off guard. It is so crazy. So not only do they have Saivu, but they also have the most influential lurker the game has ever seen. He even made that role viable again. I feel like there was a time in Counter-Strike where we discussed, is the lurking role, does it even work anymore? Get right, make it work. And now everyone tried to copy.
Well, I'll give you the contrast.
Really anymore.
The contrast is in the modern day, the other people who are really good at that role, Spinks, Blame F, they get flamed to fuckball. People think they're too selfish. Actually, you're right. Robs is the only one allowed to do it, mate.
Yeah, he's the only one who's allowed to do it. But then again, when you pull it off a 1.6 rating on T-side, you can do whatever the you want. So in that regard, it's crazy. And that's another reason why it's like, right now, you look at the players, obviously Saivu, best player in the world right now. Flamesy is playing like he's a top 3 rifler in the world. And I think part of that is something you mentioned as well. The way Apex uses utility to set Flamesy up, the way he understands what he needs in order to perform this year alone has been crazy. And then you have Robs, who I think is the most influential T-side rifler the game has maybe ever seen. And that's another angle you could open up with. We've been discussing, is Vitality the greatest team of all time? I think we're all leaning towards yes right now. I think Robs have now nailed it. With a third Grand Slam, is Robs the greatest rifler the game has ever seen? I think it's hard to debate that anymore. I think from an individual standpoint, I'd still say Nico, mechanically speaking, has probably been better and is better. But in terms of everything that Robs has achieved, from different teams to now being part of this Vitality team to having those, fear factor installed in teams, the way he approached, the way he made, a role that was dying in the lurking role viable again, I think in terms of raw impact, Robs is without a doubt, the most impactful rifler the game has ever seen in that regard.
Yeah, what I would say on that one is, that's actually why I think that discussion's getting lost, because what's weird is, I thought everyone had agreed the last few years, the distinction we're supposed to make when you say GOAT is it's not the same as best. Like, I'm with you. If we say who was the best and you have to have longevity, then Nico wins, because no one has the longevity while being super elite at the role for that many years. But if you say GOAT, I think most people, when they say greatest, actually also mean your career was the greatest. As in, you won the trophies and you won these things. So in that sense, like Robs did it. No one did it for as many years as long. And at a championship level, he gets to be number one. If you want to go on pure peak, obviously not only Nico, you can take, the Get Rights, the Colds eras of the world. They were excellent too at different points in time. But I know what you mean. If you go on by career accomplishments, well, if everyone's telling me by the same logic that's what made Glaive the GOAT, then that has to make Robs the GOAT. I'm with you on that one, yeah. Even though I agree with you, I think obviously if I was to say who was the better player, I do think it was Nico, because his peak was insane. Same thing I do. This is why I don't mind. As long as we can define what GOAT is, people can have different GOATs. Like, spoiler, as a Liverpool fan, I think Steven Gerrard was the best midfielder probably ever in the Premier League. But he can't be the GOAT, can he? Like, everyone else had like a million fucking Premier League titles and all this shit. That he just was the best. There's a difference though. Like, I think there's a fair distinction. As long as you define it that way, it makes sense. I'll give you another angle as well, Pimp, which is, you said it earlier, the ultimate thing a fanboy's going to say is the whole rings thing, isn't it? So they're going to go, yeah, but Astralis had 3 rings. Boys, is a Grand Slam not a ring? I mean, the point is, this is the only team that ever won 2. No one. If the Grand Slams, here's my riddle for you fans. If a Grand Slam is easier than a major, why did Astralis win 4 majors and 1 Grand Slam? Weird, isn't it? And by the way, here's the sickest thing of all. I made this point earlier because people, again, when you're looking at Vitality, you can pretend you're in Vitality and get greedy and just imagine they're going to win everything. Boys, it's still possible they could win another Grand Slam this year. There's still IM Atlanta, IM Cologne, ESL Pro League, and a Chinese IM at the end of the... They could win 3! That's what, by the way, if they win 3 Grand Slams, that's even way better than 3 majors. Like, a major's insane. I'm with you. It's super hard, especially because of the pressure. Obviously, nothing beats the pressure of the major final, I've been told. They'll even tell you that about Austin, by the way. That's why they almost lost it to Mongols. But I think the accomplishment of 2 Grand Slams and maybe 3 is just impossible. By the way, spoiler, Rops, there you go. He actually has 3 Grand Slams. He just has 3 of those motherfuckers. He just won half of himself. That's pretty goated too, by the way. Think how many tournaments you have to be excellent at. And I've got a stat for you. Here's a stat I haven't heard anyone bring up, and this stat is fucking crazy. Because theoretically, Pimp, the best period of Vitality should have been last year in the first season when they won the 37 series, 7 tournaments. I've got a stat for this year that is bonkers and no one's noticed it, bro. Even though you have all these nerds, no one's gone and saw this one. You know when you go to that FTU page of all the teams on HLTV, if you go LAN 2026, so we're like 4 months in now, and you do top 20, this stat is impossible, Pimp. Right, let me set it up by giving you it as a punchline. So the teams, if you go to 4v5 percentage, you lose a man. Classically in Counter-Strike, you lose the vast majority of the time. In fact, the stat used to always be like 70% of the time, the team that gets the first kill wins the round, logically, right? When you do that, on both sides of the game, the teams that are ranked 2nd to 11th in the world for 4v5 percentage are all within 3 percentage points of each other. The second team is at 31.4% of the time, they win a 4v5. And the 11th best team is at 28.3. So everyone else in Counter-Strike, this is why I'm saying Vitality has invented something, even if it's just their style of play. Everyone else is in a fairly similar band. It doesn't matter if you're 11th or you're 2nd. You win roughly about 30% of the time, 4v5. Listen to the stat, Pimp. For LAN this year, Vitality against top 20 teams wins 38% of the time. So as in, they're over like 6 point something percent more than they win 4v5s also, right? You'll never beat that. You'll probably never even get a number like that, mate. That is an impossible number. It's one of those ones where it almost makes me want to go back to the demo and say, how are they doing this? This can't be. Like, that no one can do that. That number, like as I showed, that number's so absurd compared to anyone else. That doesn't matter if it's Spirit with Donk, Monacy or Nick. No team's even in their ballpark, bro. They're just playing their own game.
Yeah, that is crazy. That is a crazy high number. I feel like sometimes when you look at those, like you see a team doing a group stage, or you see like one event where the one event off is maybe winning 40 or 45%, but consistently to do that, even as you said, with the filter of top 20 teams at 38% on both sides of the game, that is crazy. That is absurd, but that's Vitality for you right there. But I also do think that's a result of, in terms of like, okay, so you can beg the question and ask, why is that? Why they're so good at playing from behind? Well, that's because every single player of that team is a difference maker. Every single player can play a 4v5 and be the difference maker. Again, if you look at Vitality and
yes,
you make the case that the weak link of that team is Apex and Messi. Like Messi's no weak link, he's doing fantastically well, and he's a player that even in, it almost feels like the deeper you go into a tournament and the bigger the game is, the better he performs, which is outrageous. Apex during IM Rio, as he said himself, he probably had the best fracking event he's had in a long, long time.
In the finals, he had like a stat that, like in the final, I think he was like 1.23 rating, bro. He's the IGL. That's
something
impossible.
Like that. I think impossible. Yeah, but I think he was the second highest fragger for Vitality in the playoff. Like, he played exceptionally well in the quarterfinal, he played exceptionally well in the semifinal, and he had a great grand final as well. Then I think Saivu obviously transcended, and I think Robs was just behind Apex, or at least very close to Apex. So if that's supposed to be a weak link, then it kind of makes sense when you have a 4v5 where every single player is able to make the difference. Robs for that matter as well, and that's the crazy thing, and I think that's part of the reason why they're so good at playing 4v5. Robs never dies first, he's very good at not giving up his life first, but he can always bring back the round in a 4v5. Like, it doesn't matter if Saivu loses the opening duel T-side mid-Mirage, then Robs will still find a way to do some damage, T-side wherever he's at. Same could be said for Dust 2 or T-side Nuke. It doesn't matter if Apex runs out yard, he dies, and you play 4v5, then Robs will find a way to find impact inside lobby if someone is trying a move on him. So that's also part why they're so overrated, that, you can imagine as a team, if you go in and you're like, okay, we just need to get the opening kill, and then we'll play the 5v4, and then in the back of your mind, that, then we have a 60% chance of winning the round against Vitality. Like, it's crazy. It's absurd. Yeah. And I think there's many different things you can find. If you really nitpick it, it's a 6 stat that you find right there. But if you really, really, really nitpick it, then I think there's many things where Vitality are transcending and just, putting up GOAT numbers, so to speak, or numbers that we never seen before on such a consistent level. And another point to that as well, now that you want to use the top 20 ranking filter as well, Vitality, they're not sandbagging. Like, they're not going to small tournaments. They're not like farming confidence or farming stats or doing any sorts of that kind. They only play tier 1 tournament. Even this year, they went to PGL Cluj-Napoca just to put a PGL trophy in the cabinet, right? It's insane to see, and it's great to see, but that's also, to me, an argument, because back in the day, Astralis did play, certain tournaments that you'd consider, okay, maybe it's not the top of the top, or even before Corona, where tournaments were split up, where Na'Vi, being the second best team, they'd go to a star ladder, and then Astralis would go to a blast event at the same time, or whatnot. There's none of that this year as well, which is another point that I want to make, that it's probably, even more impressive that Vitality do it. And then one more thing, I don't know what you think about that, but I actually like your take on it. I think a lot of people are claiming, or at least believing, that since it's MR12, then it's harder to be consistent. It's harder to consistently win games, because they always complain about it. Yeah, exactly. So if that is the case, I'm not sure. Like, I'll be honest, I'm open to both sides of that. I'm not sure I agree that it's more random, but maybe there's a higher likelihood, or a couple of percentages more leaning one way, that it's slightly harder to be consistent. I don't think it's as bad as people make it. But if that is the case, and if you're the believer that MR12 is random, which seems to be the case for a lot of people on social media, well, then it should be even more impressive that Vitality are doing it in an MR12 era and not the MR15 back in the day, where Astralis also had a bit of a habit of sometimes going into games, they'd be down 13-5, but they'd find their way back, they'd win in overtime, they'd win the series. They had an amazing comeback against Fnatic on an Inferno game where they're down 15-9 or something like that. That's not even a luxury Vitality are having right now with MR12. So if you believe that and you're in that camp, then it's even more impressive, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it was IM Chicago 2018 in the semi-finals. It's all good. It's all up there, Pim. If the world ends, as long as I survive, we can recreate all of esports history. Don't worry. No, by the way, that's also a point I always make as well. That's another reason why Vitality is just too cracked. It's not even that, like, Astralis intentionally were doing it. Like, look, they did have the ones where they went to the Blast Pro Series. Like, there's one that does always stand out in my mind. If everyone remembers, in 2018, there was the ESL New York where Mouse Sports beat Team Liquid in the final, where Chris J did that insane Mirage clip. Every top team went there, except Astralis went to Blast Istanbul, where it was like, Na'Vi when they were like actually just like the 4th or 3rd best team, and NIP when they were about like the 9th best. I think those are the teams that were like in the final of this tournament, bro. Like, that wasn't even vaguely close to as competitive an event. But the point is, like, as you say, sometimes, if I had to guess, that's probably because they didn't want to travel to America. They just won the major. They want to stay in Europe. But, there's reasons why. And also, back in the scene, you pointed out there about, like, the 2nd and 3rd best teams. People used to cynically do this to win the prize money because we didn't have VRS, remember? There wasn't the same, like, drive to all go to the big event. So what you used to do back then, famously, was if you were, like, the 3rd or 4th best team, you just see, oh, wait, Astralis is going here. Then you go to the other tournament, like you say, the smaller tournament, but with a big prize pool, because you get to come first place. You get to win all that prize money. That was a big deal back then. Not only did Vitality never do that, even though they could skip the odd event. They only attend the absolute tier 1 events, and they never get an easy one. Even some of their rivals, Spirit went to a smaller PGL. Na'Vi went to one. Almost everyone else has done it. By the way, Mouse was going to bloody Bet Boom Dacha, and they didn't even win one of those. Like, there's loads of teams were going and trying to get those small, little easy trophies. These motherfuckers only go to the biggest tournaments with all the best teams at them and then win. And I'm with you on the whole MR12 part as well, by the way. Here's what's confusing to a fan. If you're talking about one tournament, it actually could be easier to win an MR12 because you could get lucky. But the point is, in the long run, it's harder because your opponent can get lucky. In this scenario, they essentially are never allowed to get lucky against them, Pim. Otherwise, they don't get to make all those top 4s. They don't get to win all these events. I mean, I know what you mean. Like, the difference is an Astralis comeback would be like It's not like it was impossible. It's more like, wow, what amazing execution. Look at the way they fought their way back into it, and then they grinded it out, and then they found the strat that was working, and, they did the timeout, and Zonic figured out what they did. If you ever watch some of the Vitality comebacks, the one that lives rent-free in my head will always be the Melbourne Nuke one against Falcons, where they were like 6-12 down, then they were in a 3v5, bro. That's where, like, put it this way, I won't reveal how, but forthcoming, there's a player in that team even admits, I thought the round was over. Like, I thought it's the end of the tournament, we've lost finally, and then the joke is he has to watch it, holy shit, they win, and then they win the fucking map and the tournament, and by the way, to this day, Falcons has never beaten them in grand final, won a tournament off them. Like that could have changed all of history, that one moment, but they didn't let it happen. There's another thing, Pimp. Here's the last detail, then we'll move on to some other shit. The last angle is this. People are doing that thing where they go, but who are they playing? No, idiot, you got it the wrong way round. The reason why they have no rivals is because they've destroyed them all in full spectrum. They've beat them on their maps, they've beat them in their home stadiums, they've beaten them when Vitality's playing bad and they're playing the best. They've won in every possible context that I actually think right now, the Falcons move and the fact that Na'Vi gets to be happy coming second, they've broken everyone mentally, bro. Everyone knows these guys are this shit, and we have to basically play, it feels like 10 out of 10 CS to have a chance to win. And even then, by the way, we might not win. I don't think fans understand. If you took this Vitality, let's just make them 90% of what they are, Pim. The same squad, but we'll have it. So let's just say they lose 1 out of every 3 events, and let's say maybe they lost the Austin Major in my analogy here. Maybe Mongols got them, A bunch of these other teams would have built off that, bro. Like, maybe FURIA would have ended as the best team last year. Maybe Mouse would actually have come good finally and won like a massive event. And, there's a million. You could see how history can change if one of these results. So I think actually when fans do that thing like you didn't play anyone good, they didn't allow anyone to be good. They basically strangled every single would-be contender. The analogy goes, I'll leave one of your fucking fucked up desk ones, but I'm not on a desk. It's like they strangled them in the crib, bro, before they could grow up to actually be a real rival. They just broke the fucking neck as a kid, and then they can't do it now. Like, that's mad underrated, because if you go back, people do give credit to, you had Simple on Na'Vi playing Astralis, and you had the Team Liquid squad, which we know later was mega and all-time great. You had fucking Fallen and the Brazilians, you had FaZe Clan and Nico, you had all these great teams, but I think what they've done, Vitality, is they don't let any of these teams be great. They're just not allowed to win trophies, and they all feel like failures. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that's a good way to round off the topic. I got one for you, and I'm actually curious to hear your take on it, because I think obviously the big news outside of Vitality winning the ESL Grand Slam was the whole retirement with Fallen, going on stage in Brazil and announcing his retirement. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can attack that. I know the whole overrated, underrated career, the whole switching from an AWP to a rifling in-game leader, yada, 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 there's lots of ways of attacking that. One thing that I want to open the discussion about or talk about, I didn't do it, and I don't often do this, I don't often constrain myself on the desk, because I felt like, okay, this is one of the first things I'm thinking, so I want to have a conversation about that right here, right now, but it wasn't the time and place for it, so I do actually have a brain, guys, don't worry about that. He's announcing retirement, end of the season. 242 days left before he retires. All I'm saying is, and all I'm thinking is, that's a ballsy thing to do, because that can go terribly wrong for FURIA. Now, I get it from Fallen's perspective, right? And he's probably one of the only players, if not the only player in the world, who can afford to do that, where you have so much goodwill within the FURIA organizations, within, obviously Yakinda and Molodoi, they probably feel like they owe their careers to him, in some sense, especially Yakinda, being dragged from a black hole, all of a sudden comes back into FURIA, winning trophies, and he's now a hot commodity again. Let's not forget that Yakinda, before he joined FURIA, was a player that probably had a tough time even finding a team within top 15 who wanted to play with him, right? Molodoi, different case, coming in as a youngster. All I'm saying is, if you're FURIA and you promise and you put a vow to allow Fallen to play 242 days more, that can fuck up your team completely. Like, that can destroy FURIA. Because who is to say that after Cologne, that is not really working out, that FURIA, as we've seen so far this year, they're not really on the same level. Maybe they decrease a little bit more. Maybe they're not even a top 2, top 3 team anymore. Maybe they just become part of the pack, 4, 5, 6, 7. At what point do you okay, so we know our in-game leader is going out end of the year, should we start building for the future now, or should we just waste half the year? And how is Yakinda gonna react to that? How is Molodoi gonna react to that? How is Yuri, Kisaradu? Are we okay wasting half a year? Should we maybe start to use whoever we think is gonna be the in-game in-game leader now. Now I heard conversations about Yakinda maybe saying, that, if they need me to be the in-game leader, and if that's the right decision, and certain players want to move roles, then I could be the in-game leader, and then that's what we're going to do. Does that mean that after the summer vacation that Fallen will just be a rifler within the team? So now you have Yakinda being the in-game leader, making that transition period, but you're still, quote-unquote, wasting practice time, wasting tournaments, and maybe even wasting another major, playing with a player that is going to retire. I think the reason why I feel strongly about this is that I've seen and I've been on teams where that was the number one reason why the team got destroyed from the inside. The second one player is not 100% committed anymore. And I'm not saying Fallen is not 100% focused in practice, or he's not professional enough to deal with it on his end. But the second that someone starts to doubt whether you're 100% committed into it, or the second that you're starting to maybe practice with the new guy coming in, or you're now having Yakinda being the in-game leader, and you have basically Fallen being a placeholder in a position he's not supposed to be in, because Frozen is going to join you by the end of the year, as an example. Like, all that practice and all that, focus where you're going in and you're 100% dedicated to practice. You're 100% dedicated to become better. Maybe that's only at 90 because that Fallen is on his way out, and that there's going to come a new player in. And when that new player comes in, then you have to change your position, So you play, you play mid on Mirage, and when the new player comes in, well, you're moving over to the A bomb side. So why are you studying every single mid player that you could, and why are you going in 100% to be the best in that position? It just takes a couple of percentage of lack of focus and lack of dedication to completely fall in a level where all I'm saying is that I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with it. I'm not saying that it can't work out, but it's a risk, and it's something that needs to be talked about. And I think it's unfair as well to communicate how are they going to deal with that transition period? How are they going to deal with the fact that they're playing, practicing, and showing up to a tournament with a player they know is going to retire? The interesting thing for me is, could that affect the team? Could that mean that they're dropping in a level? And what happens if they drop enough in level? Let's say that mid portion of the second part of the season, before we head into the second major, the team has fallen to now be a top 8 team or top 10 team, where it's not even realistic talking about FURIA winning the major. Do you then cut your losses? Do Fallen then retire, 116 days into the 242 days that he promised he would continue to play? I think it's interesting, and I think it's a discussion that should be open, and I'm curious to hear what you think on it.
All right, I've got a bunch of topics on this one for you. So first of all, I definitely agree, actually. In some ways, I'll make this funny. In some ways, this just shows that Thorin was right. He was the most two-faced IGL of all time. Because think about it. What he's essentially done, Pimp, is go... Remember when that announcement was happening? Wow, FURIA's going to announce something before the semi-final. Everyone thought he's going to say, after this major, I'm going to retire. Like at the end of this season, basically. Instead, what he did is go, I'm going to retire in 1.5 seasons. That's like, wait a minute, you've just actually sneakily got yourself an extra season there, bro. Like, if you think about it, let me make a serious point here that I'm not even joking on. Every single in-game leader, in my opinion, of an elite team, just like Zonic as a coach and Blade, etc., if you're in the position where you have the pieces to win and you don't win, people should, after every single season, consider, are you the right person for the job? Now, what's funny is if I say that now, and this is actually part of what Fallen cleverly played on, because he's so legendary, and it's in Brazil, and it's FURIA, and he's perceived as having come down to them to help them win, it'd be outrageous to even think of cutting Fallen. You want him to retire on some like Steven Gerrard shit, you want him to have the Liverpool shirt on it, then it's his last game, take it off, get the round of applause. You want it to go perfectly. I'm with you, Pimp. One, it would make it now so that, like, how the fuck could they bench him in the second season, as you say? And then have it so that we never even got his last tournament. We didn't even know which the last one was. At the end, he just goes, oh, sorry, guys, I'm not going to be at the major. Actually, I've been completely benched, and you can dance play. Yeah, that'll be like the biggest, like, boo! It wouldn't even matter if it made sense in the game. And the reason why I say it, you absolutely have to be allowed to ask, can Fallen be cut? Is because every motherfucker watching this show every year goes, kick Carrigan, his numbers are too bad. If you can say Carrigan can be cut, by the way, if Glaive cannot get on a top team, then Fallen can also be cut. Like, spoiler, can we do a trophy count for the last fucking 7 years or something? Like, I think those two guys are pretty far ahead. Like, what are we talking about? They're GOATs too. They're legends. If they can be cut, anyone can be cut. So one, I already do think that is a massive gamble. I'm with you. In fact, I even think I've got a positive spin, though, I'm going to put on it. Here's why I think it's negative. Because, bro, this actually happened to my favourite team, Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp said, you know what? At the end of he said it quite early in the season. At the end of this season, I'm going to retire. Nothing can change my mind, by the way. It doesn't matter if we're in the Premier League. It doesn't matter. And if you remember, actually, a lot of people will forget this. With 8 games going, they were top of the Premier League. Now, they bottled it. They actually did. They fucked it up. They drew and lost most of the game. They lost to fucking Everton, Man United, all the worst teams to lose to, too, by the way. Least satisfying way to end the career. But here's what's funny. One, I think that can also happen, Pim. I think also the pressure at that second major, bro, is going to be crazy. Like, if he gets into the playoffs there, it's going to feel like his whole career is what he's playing for now, to end it on the high. Listen, that could go awesome. That could channel into the most epic. And by the way, they'll have the best documentary ever if that happens. Or it could end really badly because it's not just a normal major. Even the pressure is going to be so nuts for him to win. But here's what's funny. I'll spin it another way. I think he did it for the same reason Jurgen Klopp did that at the beginning of the season. Because actually at the time in that season, if you forget, Liverpool the season before had like a not very good season. They'd been, I think, like 6th or 5th or something. They weren't actually that good. And this was like a bounce back season. I think he did it because he didn't think they were going to be number one. And it was a way to try and actually channel everyone on some like Michael Jordan, it's the last dance thing. Remember, the reason that documentary is called The Last Dance is because they knew that the contracts were going to end for a couple of the star players. They all got together before the season and said, this is basically our last run. Let's just like be cognizant of that and sort of keep on track and know that like we can't just go, well, we'll get him next year because there won't be a next year. So in a weird way, I actually wonder if Fallen also did it for that reason, Pimp. Because here's the thing. If he's at any of the majors in the playoffs and he says the same thing to the TO, can I just say something like after this match, basically? They're all going to say yes because they're going to know you want the moment, like when Dupree did it, you want the moment where they retire officially because that's a cool moment. It's a big pop on camera. But I actually low-key think, if you think about how the recent match against Vitality's gone or the recent the rest of this year, I think he knows that as of today, FURIA won't win these majors, bro. They'll probably be semi-finals. You know, they're good. But even in that run on this last run, they couldn't beat them. They just couldn't. They had everything go their way in that match too, by the way. Almost every possible chance to win. And you still couldn't win. So I think low-key, this is also like almost a message to FURIA. Like, this is the last 2, boys. These last 2 majors are our last chance to get this shit done. After that, I'm gone no matter what. So like, let's go for it. In a way, I agree with you, by the way. I actually do think on the long run, they probably won't win, sadly. And a lot of people have to realise life isn't, the reason we do that in movies is because it's not how life ends. Life ends like the Jurgen Klopp one. Like, you actually don't win at the end and you go, shit, I actually fucked up my last season. Oh, well, see ya. I'm off forever. Like, it's not a movie. In the end of the movie, you'd obviously win, wouldn't you? And that's how the credits would come up. In this one, he didn't win. So I know what you mean. I could definitely see it going badly, especially because, you know, the thing people don't talk about in that team is because they have this international component. Bro, they've mainly had the perfect rise until this year. Think about it. When they made the squad initially, it was worth the gamble because it was like the Brazilian squad was shit. Then you bring in people like Yekindar Moldoy. If anything, we were all like, hey, the Moldoy guy's pretty good now because he's got, and Yekindar, he's not, listen, he was nowhere close to his level at the end of the year, but he sort of got some game to him again. That was the expectation level. It was only in the second season that we all started going, hey, they could be number one, they could win the major. Oh my God. And then now they've had a little dip off again. How about you? I actually think this major, the Cologne major, is where if they finished like 5th to 8th again, bro, I think that's where, forget the fallen angle. I think you start having arguments in the team. I think you have blow-ups, you have people saying maybe we should change IGL, or maybe this guy needs to be caught, or this guy needs to be... Every top team does it. I mean, people know the story that the Vitality right before this one, I won't say the details because it's going to have to wait years to come out, but spoiler, it was a train wreck. Like, even though they were making all the semis, they were like they were at war, bro. It was a civil war inside the team and people hating each other. You just couldn't make any roster moves. You had to keep playing with a guy that you don't think should be in the team. So I'm with you. I do think people don't appreciate because they're thinking of his whole career. And for his whole career, this isn't going to change how people think of him. But I'm with you. I actually think, considering he's currently on one of the better teams in the world, that we're supposed to believe is a dark horse to win the major. You can imagine it all coming together and them getting the win. I think the gamble is enormous, bro. It's either going to be super epic or really underwhelming and really sad, actually.
Yeah, I really like the last chance analogy, you know, and I'm curious if that has played a role in it, you know, if that's what he thinks, and maybe that's a way of bringing people closer together and maybe, you know, bounding back to a level where they are in contention to win trophies again. It's just, you know, I've seen it so many times where I feel like in Counter-Strike in particular, like we often describe teams as saying, okay, one team is I know Vitality is the outlier at the moment, but one team is maybe 1, 2, 3% better than the other, you know, but playing with a player, and I know that for a fact, I've had teammates, I've seen teams, I spoke to, you know, some of the old iterations of Astralis as well. The second they knew that X player spoke to X team and wanted way out, you know, why am I playing 2 hours of extra deathmatch when this guy is leaving anyway? And why should I, you know, be 100%? It's not that they do it actively. It's not like you walk into a practice game and you're actively saying, I'm only going to try 95%. It's more so subconsciously, you know, that you're not 100% focused if you know that something is going to change. And furthermore, it's just, if anything, it's more as you also did the intro right here saying that I haven't made up my mind, I'm not sure if I like the idea, if it's a bad idea or whatnot, but I want to poise the question now, so I'm not, in 242 days when he retires, then be like, yeah, actually back then when he did it, I thought this and I thought this and I thought that, and here we are now, we know it was like, that's too cheap, and that's what basically every fucking fan does at the moment, they always like to play smart whenever they know the result, and then they've made the fit the narrative, but I think it's a question that should be asked, and I think right now here on our podcast is a perfect moment to do it. Obviously on the desk, when it's all hyped up, when everyone is crying inside the arena, it's not the proper thing to attack. So it's all about knowing your boundaries and your limits. But it did make me think in that very moment, whoa, that's a big gamble. You're saying 242 days. Does that mean that that's non-negotiable? Does that mean that you're playing every single tournament in that period, or does it mean that maybe some of the, I don't know, if you're attending some of the smaller IEMs or one of the smaller PGLs, the smaller blast events, is that where you bring in, the guy who you're substituting with and giving him, maybe a little bit of play time and a bit of experience, and then you come back in for the major and you go out with a big bang, or what is that going to look like? So I think they have a responsibility first and foremost, Fallen to retire in a Brazilian arena. I get it. I get why he wants to do that.
Of course.
Ideally, I think he would have wanted to wait, but then that was the last moment to do it.
Yes.
But also, they think that they now put themselves in a position where they need to continue to communicate about it. They need to reassure, I guess, themselves, but also the fans and us following that, we have a plan in place and we're thinking this about it. And maybe I'm not going to play all the tournaments in this 242-day period. And maybe I'm even open to the fact that I'm not going to play the next major if things are not going according to plan or whatnot. Because if it's going to be one of those things where now you said that I'm going to be here for 242 days and I'm not going to retire before end of next major, and that's just how it's going to be, regardless of how we're playing, regardless of what's going on, then that can be explosive shit for FURIA. And not only in that period, but even to recoup afterwards, because let's be honest, I think people underestimate how big of an impact Fallen have had on that FURIA rise, not necessarily as an in-game leader, not necessarily as a player, but you can look at a guy like Molodoi. It's basically his biggest idol, he's the guy that brought him into life, and he's the guy that gave him a career almost. I think he really respects Fallen a lot, and probably for good reason. I think the same could be said for Yakinda. I think he has a lot of loyalty towards Fallen, but having loyalty and keeping that relationship close, is good in a lot of different ways, but it also comes at the caveat that, that could mask for certain hard decisions to be made in that period. So it's just more so to open that conversation now, have people, who are watching this think about it themselves and maybe come to some thoughts themselves, and then we can revisit it, during Cologne. We can revisit it at the second part of the season, because I think it's going to be more complicated than just saying that I'm going to retire in 242 days. I don't think personally that he's going to play all the tournaments. I do think that there's going to be a transition period, and I'm curious to see how that's going to look and how they're going to juggle all that, because trust me, it's not easy to do.
One last take on that as well is this. This is pure speculation, but I also think on some level that doing this announcement this way is an admission. I know my team isn't actually going to be number one and win all these tournaments, because if he actually really believed he could win both the majors this year and end the team as the year's number one, I don't think you make the announcement. What you do is you just wait until he stops winning. Like if I've always said this about Carrigan. Actually, if anything, I get more scared when Carrigan doesn't win the major. I think if he wins the major, he's going to go, let me try the next one too. Because he's got that mentality where he wants to end with the most trophies. He wants to be known as the GOAT. He wants to see what's possible. So I think if Fallen really believed he could win these majors, he'd go, I will retire as soon as this team stops being good. At that moment, then it'll be appropriate. I'll say, if anything, saying it now to me, like I say, one, maybe like fires the troops up and makes you realise, look, if you want to win a major with Fallen, you better fucking do it in the next year. And then also, too, it's sort of a way of showing that, like, I know that, like, essentially I can get ahead of this one. At the end of the year, I'm probably going to be disappointed with some of the results. We probably didn't win all the trophies we won. Maybe the team even needs a change. There's that detail too. Remember, he always does mention that he actually, I suppose it wasn't necessarily his idea. It was more like they got Molodoi and then they were just sort of like, can you stick around, basically? Because no one knew that'd be a great roster. It was some weird mishmash of Brazilians and fucking people from Eastern Europe, which doesn't even make sense. So, no, I also think people don't appreciate, like, I actually think if he really thought he was number one, he'd just keep winning the tournaments, bro. Because again, if you had a career as long as they have, same with Carrigan, what's one more season? If you can really win, one more season's worth it. Listen, one more season, if you're not going to win at all, it's a fucking nightmare, bro. That's all the harshness of the cycle and practicing and looking at a million demos, and at the end you don't even get to win the trophy. So I also think it's somewhat telling that, as we're pointing out here, it's probably not perfect within FURIA. They're probably right on the edge, and if they win, it'll be great. If they don't, it might go really dark within like 3 months for all we know.